Welcome to a conversation with a community leader sponsored by Leadership Kitsap. I'm your host, Cary Bozeman, and I'm the former mayor of the city of Bremerton, and I'm currently a Port of Bremerton commissioner. And my guest today is one of my fellow commissioners, Axel Strakeljahn. Try to spell that one if you want. Who is a commissioner for the port and is now a co-chair of a new organization called the Gorse Coalition, which we're going to talk about today, because everyone in this county is interested in the work around the issue of Gorst and the traffic problems around Gorse. So, Axel, welcome to the show. Good to have you here.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozeman, and thank you for hosting me today. It's a pleasure to be here.
Before we get into Gorse Coalition, Axel, where are you from and what brought you to Kitsap County?
Well, I grew up over in Kent, south of Seattle there, and upon completing my education, I came over here with a company back in about 1980 and worked in management for that corporation for 15, 20 years, and then continued to grow with other corporations and stayed here. So I've been here close to 40 years and pleased to call it home.
I was going to say, you've also been on a port commissioner for, I think you're in your second term. Is that correct?
Correct, Commissioner. I'm in my second term or my 10th year. I'll tell you, it's been a very exciting experience, and I'm really pleased to be able to serve our community on the Port Commission in so many levels. A lot of people don't always realize what port commissioners do and what a great economic impact the port has to all of Kitsap. And of course, with my business background that I bring, and I think that really puts it well into play.
Well, I know I've certainly enjoyed serving with you, Axel. You're an important part of the port. So let's get on to the Gorse Coalition, which is about dealing with the terrible traffic issues we all know about in Gorse, because no one that lives in Kitsap County hasn't put up with that traffic congestion spot. And now you and some other leaders in our community have created this organization called the Gorse Coalition. What's the mission and the goal of the Gorse Coalition?
Well, you said it well, Commissioner, is that the traffic and the congestion through that corridor is something none of us should have to really deal with. And our mission is to address not only the traffic situation, but also the resiliency concern that corridor has. You know, if you go back in time and we go to look how important Gorst is, and historically, there were at one time 5 lumber mills in Gorst on the water, and they provided some of the lumber that went into Bill Boeing's airplanes over in Seattle when Bill Boeing started the Boeing Company. And from there, after that, businesses took off and were established in Gorst. And along with that, we have that estuary there, Gorse Creek, that came down. And there are 2 very important fish passages there in that region. So it's more than just traffic. We have an environmental issue there. We obviously have a traffic concern and safety concern, but it's also an important corridor, the front door to Kitsap County, also the freight corridor, which not only serves Kitsap, but travels up to Jefferson County. In addition to that, we have 5 military installations here in Kitsap, and we're lucky to have those installations. And that corridor also is important to the military. And so, we talk about traffic a lot and congestion, but if you take and kind of look at what that corridor does for our entire community in the peninsula, it's extremely impactful.
Who makes up the Gorse Coalition? Who are the participants in this effort?
Well, the port has always been a leader in looking at fixes and opportunities for Gorse because of the national airport, as well as the industrial center that Gorse serves. But to answer that question directly, Commissioner, I'm very pleased to serve as a co-chair on the coalition, but we have really a strong united front. We have all of the cities, that'd be Port Orchard, Bremerton, Paulsbo, united on this. We have all your municipalities, the cities, the port, Kitsap Transit, as well as the chambers of commerce, all the way up through Silverdale. So we have a very strong coalition. We have a very strong united group that all feel that this corridor is extremely, needs the attention that it really deserves and hasn't had for so many years. The military serves as a liaison or consultant to our group as well. Although they're not on the co-chair committee, they are heavily involved as well because that corridor serves the military.
Yeah, I've spoken with military people who say this is a high priority for them and for the shipyard. So I'm sure they're going to be really interested in. Is this effort, Axel, coming out of the Kitsap Regional Council, KRCC?
Well, actually not. No, this is a standalone coalition, Commissioner. It just so happens the members on the Kitsap Regional Council are also the members of the coalition, just happens to be. But in addition to the municipalities that are involved, we also have Congressman Kilmer heavily involved in this as well, because he sees the value and importance of supporting that corridor, not only as a freight corridor, but also as it pertains to resiliency. You know, we've experienced flooding and we've experienced, environmental changes there. And Congressman Kilmer certainly understands the importance and value of that. And he's a great asset to have on our team as well.
Well, also I'm sure you'll be looking for federal funding at some point. So he's going to be a real asset. I know when Norm Dix was our congressman, he worked really hard on finding transportation money in the federal budget. So, and he was pretty successful for us. So that tunnel we built in Bremerton, I remember Norm Dix came up with about $30 million for us on that project, which is not you're going to need a lot more than that on this project. I realize that. Axel, what do you see in the next 3 years coming down the road on this project? Where would you hope to be in terms of progress toward a solution in the next, say, 3 years?
Well, that's a great question. We're really looking at the 24 and 36 month window currently. WashDOT 2 years ago did a Highway 16 corridor study. And they have identified the fixes to address that Gorse corridor. So those projects have already been identified, and a financial number has been assigned to them. Although those numbers continue to be fluid, depending on economics and so forth. But we're looking at, you touched on it as well as Norm Dix when he was our representative. Congressman Kilmer is also eyeing funds that could potentially come out of Washington in the way of infrastructure funding that would come to the states. And there's been discussion of an infrastructure package since August or September of last year. And that discussion continues to talk and be held in Washington. But our strength really with the congressman is that should an infrastructure package come out of Washington, D.C. and be assigned to the states in the next 24 months or 30 months, we want to be in the position that those funds are accessible and those monies can be designated to the project in Gorst. And so that is why we're working very, very hard now on the front side of it to identify Gorst as the project in the state to fund. The legislature, as you know, is currently in session. I've had 2 meetings with 2 legislators last week, and I have some more coming up in the next following weeks as we address the Gorse issue and we address the fixes and be sure that we're in alignment in our thought processes and alignment with the priorities of what transportation project needs to be addressed. And so really the next 24 to 36 months are critical that we have everybody on the same page, all of our legislators, as well as our state senators on the federal level, that we can get the funding really needed for this mega project.
Is there actually a plan that's ever been adopted by the state for a solution to this? And we're not just talking about Gorse, right? You're also talking about the Belfast corridor, the highway off of 60, the highway off of the main highway up to Belfair, which is also beginning to be, or already is, a real traffic nightmare for people, especially during hours coming and going from work, probably at the shipyard. So this project also is going to deal with that corridor also. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, Commissioner, it will. So to answer your question, yes, WashDOT, when they did the 16 study, that is one of the bullet points on their study. And our technical group, so the Gorse Coalition, we have a co-chair, we have an executive committee, we have a technical committee, and we have an environmental committee. And so we've really got all the players from the tribes to the technical people involved to really get the message honed down and prioritize the projects and the fixes needed. WashDOT has identified those. They have them listed by project. But as you mentioned earlier, it's not just a state level issue. It's going to have to be a federal level issue because it's not a $2 or $3 million fix. And the number is too big for the state of Washington to handle alone. And that is why we really developed the coalition, is to position ourselves well on the federal side, as well as the state side, in which to gain funding.
Well, I had heard way back, I don't know where it came from, but there was a number of 300 million out there. That's probably not enough for this project, but so we're talking about a major big project. It's not the Seattle Tunnel for sure, but we're going to talk 3 or 4 or $500 million, I'm sure. Axel, this is a big undertaking. It's long overdue. So how are you? I'm sure you're going to be hiring people. How are you going to finance this effort, the Gorse Coalition?
You know, you're right. It is a huge undertaking, and I'll tell you, Commissioner, I find myself working on it almost every single day. There's always something to be done, it seems like, or calls and meetings that come up. We have gone through and had a interview team who has selected a consulting group that has been very successful in mega project transportation projects here in the state of Washington. And they started to work about 10 days ago, and they have been absolutely, I want to say they're on the run. They are very aggressive. They're on track. They've already facilitated meetings with legislators and phone calls. And as recent as last Friday, there has been a transportation budget request placed in the legislature, sponsored by a representative for this project. And that is really a big deal. So we're moving fast on it. To answer your question, how is it funded? All of the organizations that are on the executive committee, that would be the Port of Bremerton being a sponsor, the city, the county, each one of those organizations is working and looking into their budget opportunities in which to put some money aside for this goal. I can tell you that the port has always been a leader in this because the port has always seen the value and the importance of this corridor to the community. And so we've participated in studies before this for Gorse. One of the examples, Commissioner, I can share with you is the realignment of Highway 3 as it comes down into 16. That was realigned about 3 years ago with they just say new paint, but it was more than that. Mayor Lent at the time, myself, and I think one of the county individuals were really the ones that drove that project and were successful in adding that lane and getting that aligned. So really, it's a team effort, and it's going to require all of our dedication to make this work. And the funding currently is coming out from the municipalities' budgets.
Well, speaking of the port, I mean, the port's totally tied into this traffic issue because we've got like 2,500 people working out at the port now and over 60 companies. And now you've got Amazon out there where, they've got trucks on the road 24/7 probably. So, the port's very interested. And I know with your leadership and the port's contribution to this effort, it's really an important part of our future, what goes on in that corridor traffic wise. So it just makes sense that the port's involved and you're involved and all of us are going to be involved. So do you think, what do you sense on timeline? Have you given any thought to where we'll be like 5 years from now? Do you even have a thought about that? Or is it a 10-year from now you think we'll be under construction? Or are you just playing this like one chunk of time and see where that takes us?
Well, I would like to say in 5 years from now, we have a construction plan in place and we're beginning to construct and do some transportation repair issues down there. It's long overdue, Commissioner. It's long overdue. I want to say it's 20 years overdue. The state has talked about it, but it's such a large project. There's no way they can take it on their own. And until we get the solid infrastructure funding, I don't see the state really pushing forward on it. But with this new push that we have, the coalition that we put together last year, I'd really like to see us in a construction phase in the next 5 years.
Speaking of that, I've talked to Bill Mahan, one of the former port commissioners, once, and he reminded me that 20 years ago there were meetings going on around this issue, and that never got anywhere, and there was never much progress made. But they've been talking about it for 20, 30 years. So, I mean, you're right about timing. Now is the time. I remember also hearing one time there was talk about a part of the solution would be to build a bridge from over this Gorse area that reconnected up as you go up the hill to Highway 16. Was that ever the bridge idea? Was it ever really real? Was there the state? Did anybody ever have a plan about that? Is it still an option of how we might get traffic through that corridor?
Well, that's a great question. Some people, we kind of say tongue in cheek a bridge once in a while, but to be honest with you, yes, it was seriously discussed. It was a serious opportunity to bridge where you're talking about from Port Orchard, where it bridges over Gorst. And I think the reality of that is not what we would see a bridge there, but what we would see would be an elevated roadway. I think that's what we're going to see as reality rather than a bridge. Now, on the environmental side, a bridge might be the best thing, but again, we have to be very sensitive of the environment, the estuary that's there, and the fish passages.
Well, it's like they do with rapid transit or any of that. They just elevate it over the, and right up above. Hey, Axel, I've read through your report, the Gorse Coalition agenda, and I see you've involved, which I think is a great idea, the Suquamish tribe on this issue. What do you see as their role and what is their interest in this project?
Well, we're very pleased to have the tribe working with us on our environmental side and also including into the technical side of it. They're very important to us as a region. The tribe is very important to that estuary and to those fish passages, as they want nothing more than to protect them, enhance them, and make sure that they're viable and we have no negative impact, of course. We're really glad to have them serving, Cary, and I tell you, they're very helpful, very supportive of our mission there. They understand the importance and the seriousness of not only the transportation side, but also how we can improve that estuary through this process.
Yeah, and you're also, I noticed too, you're also got in your plan to protect the ecosystem, the Gorse Creek watershed, which we all know is really important for salmon and that sort of thing. So all these elements are going to be a part of the project, and as well as it looks like all the cities and the county, and I'm sure you're going to have private sector people in there. I think you've really pulled together one of the most diverse and inclusive groups that probably has ever been pulled together, because there's no one in Kitsap County who doesn't want to see this problem solved. So I think you've taken on a big, important project, Axel, and I think you'll be surprised at how much time you're going to end up putting in on this, but it's going to be worth it for the community. Axel, obviously the question about this, the bottom line is, how, will there be funding ever in the near future? Because we know the state's having transportation funding challenges right now because of the gas tax going down. And I think there's a effort in the legislature to increase gas tax by up to 50 cents, which means we'd be the highest gas tax in the country at $1 a gallon. So, what's your sense on how this funding comes together, which is in the end going to be the bottom line? How can we fund this project?
That's a great question, Commissioner. And, this is a multifaceted project. So, let me start with on the federal side and our Congressman Kilmer. As the federal government looks for infrastructure projects throughout the nation, we want to be positioned that this is identified as one of the major infrastructure needs in our state. And should we get funding out of the federal government for infrastructure, which has been a big topic of conversation, we would like to be on the plate and on the top of the list to receive that funding. Now, to go to the state level, the state is obviously struggling on the transportation dollar side, but there's a tremendous amount of conversation going on in the legislature. And I was on several calls here in the last 3 months with the Transportation Committee, Senator Fye, and they're all looking at how we can better fund transportation dollars. And one of the topics that's on the table in Olympia during our session is that the sales tax from motor vehicles goes to transportation rather than the sales tax general fund. And so they're looking at ways in which if a motor vehicle is purchased or a motorcycle or whatever it might be, that those tax dollars go directly to transportation. And that's something way different than we've ever experienced in the state of Washington. And so there's going to have to be a little bit of creative give and take in Olympia as to see how we can get the dollars in the right place to address the needed projects.
Yeah. Well, I see the legislature's also, somebody's proposing a capital gains tax, and I'm not sure that'll pass. It hasn't before, but if it did, then maybe some money from that could go to transportation, which would give us another revenue source for a project like this. So it's going to be interesting. But you know something, Axel? This might take a long time. It might, but 10 years goes pretty fast. And if we, in 10 years or 7 years, we have money aside, we have a plan to fix this problem, then it'll be fixed and it'll be better for the next 100 years. So, there's never a time like today to get started. So I'm really, really happy. Axel, is there anything about this project I have not asked you that you would like to share with the audience?
Well, I want to touch on the resiliency part of it just a little bit. I think a lot of us have experienced flooding in Gorst, the highway being closed, when it's underwater and we have a king tide. And I think what the community really also needs to know is how important a role that the port plays in this as well. We have the national airport, the Port of Bremerton, and we have an agreement with FEMA that should we have an environmental catastrophe or an environmental catastrophic event happen in our region, like let's say an earthquake or a tsunami, that our airport is where FEMA and the Red Cross would set up for the food, water, shelter, emergency services. And, although we're pleased to do that at the port, we need to be able to get off the hill into our communities. And if Gorst has a problem, if we lose a road down there or we're flooded, we cannot get our safety and Red Cross supplies to our communities. And so, in Gorst, it has transportation issues for sure, congestion, but it's also a safety concern. And so it really puts it higher on the priority list, in my opinion, that it gets addressed. And then when you couple that with the resiliency side and what it does for the military, serving our 5 installations with freight, staff, military enlisted people, it again heightens the seriousness and the impact it has to this entire region. So, you put all those pieces together. As I said, it's multifaceted. I think it really shows that it is a serious issue. It needs to be addressed, and perhaps hasn't been addressed tough enough or diligent enough over the last 20 years.
Well, I noticed you have a committee about, it's called Coalition Building Partners, and it's broad support advocacy for this project and et cetera. And I thought to myself, that would be something I wouldn't mind helping you with. So I'll volunteer if you need me to be on your Coalition Building Partners project. So that's the kind of thing I like anyway, bringing people together and trying to find money. So there you go, Axel. You got to volunteer. Anything else before we close? You're welcome. Anything else you might want to make? You're a port commissioner. Is there anything else you might want to just say quickly about the port before we close our conversation here?
Well, that's a great question, and I'll tell you, I'm so proud to serve on the Port Commission, Commissioner, and I think we're there. It's exciting times at the port. I can remember when I first got elected term and a half ago. It was the marinas weren't full. We were struggling to make our budgets work, and our growth wasn't there, and there was a lot of things not going on. And I can tell you, I'm so proud to be there now, and what we've done for our community. The marinas are full. We're generating revenues. We're keeping our prices down. We're the largest industrial center west of Seattle. We've got record growth in jobs and businesses that impact the entire region of Kitsap, not just the port and not just there in Bremerton, but in all corners from Bainbridge Island all the way to Gig Harbor. And, very proud to serve on that committee and on that commission and being one of the greatest economic leaders in the county.
Well, Axel, you've taken on a big load, and I want to thank you for your leadership on this. It's so important to our community. So I appreciated our conversation with Axel Strakeljahn today. He's a port commissioner, but even as important now, he is one of the co-chairs of the Gorse Coalition. It's a long-term project, but it will have major positive impacts on our community in the future. Thank you, Axel, and thank everyone for joining us again on a conversation with a community leader. I'm Cary Bozeman, and we'll see you next time with another community leader.
Leadership Kitsap is our community's civic leadership program. Leadership Kitsap fosters and empowers educated, prepared, and engaged community leaders. For over 25 years, we have cultivated leaders that work collaboratively to create positive change, dedicated to making our community a better place to work and live. We expose our class to Kitsap's leaders across public, private, and nonprofit sectors. We're happy to bring many of the conversations with these leaders to you. Strong leaders build strong communities.